So I hope the screen is visible now.
Yeah, your screen is visible.
Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. So my name is Abhishek. I am a full stack developer at an organization by the name of Quantis in Sector 3. So I sorry have been in the industry for roughly around 9 years, building mobile app, web apps, or and whatever you ask me to do it in the world of .NET. So today's topic is regarding an open source um, component library that I have built, Blazor-UI. So let's move on. So before we start on with the library, let's discuss some basics and some concepts as to why we reached here. So the first thing that comes in our mind is that why should we go for component driven development? I mean, we can have full pages like we used to have in the web forms days. Um, there used to be even then there used to be modules like sub partial pages, but so component creating modules is not something new for us developers. It's something that we have been trying to do since very early days. So this is a periodic table of all the elements available in the web application, in any web application. So this was created by Josh, and uh, it says that every element in every page in a web app is actually composed of all small components. So even if you are not developing a component driven app, by design HTML is actually a component driven app. So it is part of the parent is HTML, and then we have a head and body tag, and we have smaller components, anchor tags and meta tags. So everything in a web app is actually composed up of smaller components. So next, the thing is that in a component driven development, instead of going from a bigger perspective to a smaller, like building the pages, then creating the templates, we take a bottom up approach. So we create smaller components first, like we create button components, and so we call them atoms. Then we can create slightly bigger components which are actually composition. For example, we can have input group which has a label and a text box and validation errors combined. Then we can have a bigger component like a grid which has tables, rows, tree views, and it in itself is a whole thing which with a lot of logic. So that is how the components should be created, and it should follow and the most important reason for component driven development is to have consistency of your UI and behavior across the app. So it's basically, this is a cartoon of a joke, like um, in the whole part of the app, the button is yellow, but in some areas it's purple. So instead of using the same component, one developer just copy pasted the code. So when we changed in the original component, it does not got reflected in the all the areas. So that was about why to go through the component driven side. Now to the next principle that we have in Blazor UI is actually reactive programming. So what exactly is the difference between imperative and reactive programming? So in imperative programming that we have been doing mostly in the .NET world, in the .NET web world specifically, as the I mean most for the most part of the .NET web space, be it web forms, MVC, Razor pages, we have always been in a request response model. So like a request comes in, we calculate whatever we have to do, whether it's an operation or it's a query, and we give it the response. In When we move to the native app space like Xamarin, wherein we creating mobile apps, or WPF or any other desktop apps, we are not in a request response model. We are actually in a connected state throughout the session of the user. So we are not using request response model there. We have models like MVVM there. So the traditional request response model might not work in the context of Blazor, since Blazor is actually a UI driven app. So that was imperative, and in whereas in reactive, we actually create an operation and we define based on the, like, whatever, we do not compute the current state, as in we store the current state at a particular point. We actually operate on the events that are coming. We operate on the events, and we are doing the final, we are using the final outputs wherever we need. So that is the basic difference. Like in imperative, the caller will tell that he needs the response, so it is kind of a pull method. In Whereas in reactive, the sender will tell that hey, there is a new event that has popped up, and do you want to do anything? So it is more of a push model. So it's basically, the difference is the pull versus push model. Um, Now, coming on to the reactive web apps. So, like I just mentioned, that for most part of the .NET web apps, we have been in a request response model. But now, since Blazor is always in a connected model, be it Blazor client side, wherein everything is actually running on the browser, giving an almost feel of a native app. I mean, even in the native app, everything runs in the same process. So in Blazor client side, everything is running in the same process of browser, and nothing goes outside the context of browser. I mean, we can do, like, pass on some operations to the browser. I mean, Blazor is not doing file handling by itself, but you get the point that for the whole most part of the application, it's in a single context model. Even in the Blazor server side, you are connected via signal connection for the whole time of the user session. So Blazor is actually giving a completely different app model, and it requires, in my opinion, a significant mindset shift as compared to what we have been doing till now in web apps. Apart from that, reactive web apps also allows us to be elastic, responsive, and resilient, because of by the nature of being message driven. So elastic, by elastic, what I mean is that the caller and the one who is actually doing the operation are not directly linked. So a caller can push the messages to the queue, and the one who is operating can operate on the inputs and the events at their own pace. So we can have much more elasticity in the application. And since we are not doing anything on the UI thread, and we are not blocking anything, so it allows for more responsive UIs. And since everything is present in the I mean, resilient is something that we can have in imperative programming as well, uh, by having retries and all. but by the nature of being message driven, they are resilient since everything is already present in the message store. So whenever the operation, the person who the actor who is actually doing the operation, whenever it comes up, so they can actually do all the operations. Okay. So the next thing is that why should you care about Blazor UI? I mean, there are some great other open source component libraries like Blazorize, for example, which is the next session that we have. So why exactly did I opt on to create a completely new component library, Blazor UI, and not actually contribute on to Blazorize or Mad Blazor? I mean, well, to be honest, Blazor UI has many of the concepts uh, s- similar to Blazorize at this point in time. I mean, time will tell how much we diverge as the time passes on. But the major difference that Blazorize and Blazor UI have is that Blazor UI is more inclined towards reactive web apps. So almost every component, everywhere you will find observables going using. So most of all, the I mean the major focus is on reactive x, and it is completely dependent on using on rx, and the cs is currently we are using Bootstrap. We do have plans to allow more frameworks like Material and Bulma, but I would need some help in covering those areas. Okay, so before we move on to code, so anyone has any questions before we move on to code? Okay, so I assume that we do not have any questions. Let me start. Um, Let me stop the presentation. Okay, so the Blazor UI project is basically composed of three projects at the moment. So first one is actually the core library, which has all the components in it. The second is actually the next two are actually for the documentation that we'll be using. I'm still figuring out whether we should use GitHub Pages, or whether I should go on to Azure Static Web Apps or create a completely new website of its own. I tried with GitHub Pages, but since it allows only compile, and the Blazor UI is currently targeting .NET 5, so the size was coming up around 45 MB. So on every push, pushing 45 MB of binaries to GitHub will actually have much higher load on the repository. So I'm still figuring out whether I should have the binaries in a different, but till then you can always clone the repo and have the samples project, and as soon as you run it, you will have all the samples for all the components. So each category has like forms, tables. So currently it has only two components, tables and forms. So to give you the structure, like every component is actually inheriting from a base component, which like I mentioned that it is heavily dependent on reactive. So it has a method which actually uh, accepts any observable, and it changes the state whenever the observable changes. The observable emits a new value. So it has the table. So let's get on to code and let's do some documentation. So let us start a project. I'll create a new Blazor component by the name table. Okay, so let's start this project. Control F5. Okay, so I tables. Oops. Now it should have our new component. Yep. So let's go around and use our table component. Since we are having a uh, Bootstrap demo, so Bootstrap has overrides for all the components, the Bootstrap folder. Currently, Bootstrap overrides does not have, much of the overrides, except they are using CSS classes from Bootstrap to. So I'll create. I'll using branches dot components dot bootstrap dot tables. So let's do table and let's see what all inputs does it need. So it needs a column. Yes, sir. Yes,
Abhishek,
Ravi.
can you increase the font a little bit? Basically, I think.
Okay.
Oh,
Now is it better?
yeah, it should be fine now.
Okay. Okay. So before moving on, let me, since we are creating a table, let me also create some sample users. Oops. List of user. So what I did was I have created a sample model user and a fake user generation using another open source library bogus to create some fake data for our demos. Equals, let's say users to fake user dot valid defaults dot generate. Let's generate 10 items. Okay, so the namespaces are taking too much space, so let's include these two as well. Using so now it should be much more legible. Okay, so this is pretty much ready. Now what does it need? It needs, let me just open up something else as well. It needs a head content. So let's give it a head content. So first thing it would need is what does okay. So okay, I will come up to this as well. So for the first thing is how to actually access the data. So what we'll do is that since we already have the data here, so we'll just give it a lambda users. So it no, it accepts one param. Task of finding. Okay, so it needs a task from result. Okay, so let's create a column definitions as well. Oh no, that's fine. We are. So head content is basically for the header. Let's call it ID th name h email body. What exactly is the error coming up? Multiple components user tag. Oh, okay. I got it. So what happened is that our component is also table and our sample is also named table. Let me just rename it to table demo. Oh, oops. Now it should be good. I hope I do not make any samples bootstrap pages table. Okay. So sometimes I have to build clean. Okay, so it actually needs the types of user, the table data filters. Since we are not having any data filters as of now, we'll use the default ones. Table data filters. Is it have? No, it has the default ones only. It needs the full namespace and start components. So since it's a sample app, we have to create these much things. In a real world app, you would have your own version of data filters and column definitions. Maybe we can do without components dot ASP.NET dot tables dot column definition of users. Okay, so it is enumerable. Let's just do this. So everything is happy. Let's try to run this now. And it should show us a table, a basic table with only headers. Since okay, do I need to? Yep. Now we can have the body as well. Here's the project. Here is the project. Okay. So in the body, you'll get each element. It's not something specific to Blazor UI. In Blazor, whatever you are passing through as a child component, as a cascading parameter, you will find it in context. So in context, you will find the ID, the context dot name, td at context dot email. So for to make it a bit simpler, I have only 3 columns. Let's move on. Let's see if now it should show us 10 rows as well now. Yep. So we have ID, name, and email. So the styling needs to be fixed so that it is aligned. We can do something. So it since it's still in development, so it still has some rough edges, but that's how the code structure is. And so for the contribution part, I would say if you are someone who have a bit of experience working with Blazor components, I would love to have help in creating components. If you are comparatively newer to Blazor, I would request you to have your contributions towards the documentation. Okay, so let's move on. So that was all from the code part. Anyone has any questions? Any questions so far?
Can you go on the code, Abhishek, a bit? I have a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
So this like the entity which you are using, so this is from entity framework or
No.
you have.
I actually just have a generic element class. So what happens is that all the rows will actually depend on the same entity. So I named it the entity. So it's just whatever each row will have. So context will actually have user. So if you name it like car, so context will actually get an instance of car.
And what about this data accessor?
So data accessor is basically a function that you will give, which will return a task of IEnumerable of whatever entity that you have passed. So what happens is, currently I'm not using any filters. So what happens is whenever uh, as we move, as we progress, so what I'm planning is that whenever like user changes the sorting field or any other thing, so I'll send that data in table data filters, which you'll receive as an input. So you have to give me a function which will accept those filters, which will have information like page number, page size, as in user selected the next page, so you'll have page number 2 in the
Mhm.
page number column. So you can, so it I need basically data accessor needs a function which will receive a
Mhm.
table data filters and
Mhm.
will return an IEnumerable of the entities.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. And is your component based on any other library or anything like any other engine or anything, just like some of the Blazor components like Matte Blazor, or there is one exclusive Blazor,
Hmm.
SK elusive something.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
he called it as exclusive Blazor. So exclusive Blazor, if you have to work on or contribute to exclusive Blazor, you need to have Node.js installed on your system. So is there any dependency on any other engine apart from like Visual Studio and .NET in your UI library?
No, you only need .NET. There is no third-party dependency.
Mm-hmm.
The only dependencies are the ASP.NET components, the official packages of Blazor, and
Mm-hmm.
System Reactive, the RX.NET package. Except these two dependencies, there are no dependencies for either development or using the library. In fact, I am in the Bootstrap as well. I am adding the class, but you will see that there is no triple W root. So we have the intention to give the complete control of the CSS to the caller. So you give your own Bootstrap CSS. We are just giving you the logic. And if
Okay.
you want this component CSS class, every component will, since they are inheriting from base component, every component will have a component CSS class list. So in case you do not want the Bootstrap default class table, or since
Mm.
v5 alpha is coming, so if there is a time like before after v5 launches and I migrate to v5 Bootstrap, so if you feel that you do not need these classes, you can just override, you can just remove all classes in this and add your own classes. So the table, the while rendering, will actually use the CSS class that you provided.
Okay. Okay.
So for
And
this
currently the
styling,
comp.
yes,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. So-
I mean, I was saying the same thing, that for styling, we give complete control to the color.
Okay. Okay. And currently the only components available are forms and tables.
Yes. I have the roadmap available on the GitHub. I mean,
Yeah. So yeah, let's move ahead to that then.
okay. So this is the repository Abhishek Siddhu / Blazor-UI. So if you want to try it out as a consumer, you have the NuGet feed available. So you can go here and download all the any packages that you want. So you can add this, and if you want to connect to feed, it has all the steps, like you can add this source in your Visual Studio, or you can add NuGet.config in the root of your project. So if you would clone this, you would notice that it already has a NuGet.config with that package set. So either you can use this NuGet config, or if you don't want to have a NuGet config, you can add it to Visual Studio. So whatever way you feel comfortable, you can use it. And currently it has 4 versions. So Bootstrap demo, like I said, I'm still figuring out whether to host it on GitHub pages. But in the meanwhile, you can clone the project and have the samples here. But since it's not hosted anywhere, so link is actually coming soon. If you want to see the roadmap, so in the wiki, you will have the roadmap. So for the first V0 1.1, I'm targeting tables, forms, buttons, button group, drop down, input text, and input text area. So almost everything in forms should be complete in v0.1, and a basic implementation of a state manager. So what it would do is, like, since we are going around uh, passing events, so we would need a way to actually handle all those events. So uh, I won't say to have such large ambitions like Flux, having something like Flux in Blazor, but let's see how it goes. But the intent is something like that only. So you have the roadmap here. For if you want to see the contribution guidelines, I mean, so one thing, like Ravi also mentioned in his session, so the branches, the main branch is actually not to be touched with. Every commit in main branch will represent a new major or minor version deployment. So when 0.1 launches, we'll have one squashed commit in main branch, um, and all PRs will do a squash merge. So that's all for the roadmap. Anything else? Or if you don't want to contribute, you can actually donate as well.
Yeah,
And
go on.
If you really like, you can have a Patreon as well. I have a Patreon as well, and actually I have one Patreon already as well who is using Blazor-UI and who is committing to me. I should not show the exact amounts, but whatever you want to contribute, it's up to you. So any kind of contributions and questions are welcome. I guess that was all from my end. If no questions, we are still waiting for Mladen, I guess.
Yeah, we are still waiting for Mladen.
Okay.
Basically, we expected your session to go till 12:15, so that's why.
Okay.
Okay.
So we can do some. I mean, I can do some more live coding. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the next thing is, let's go with a simple one button. So let's create a new category.
Sorry to interrupt you before
Mhm.
you start. For documentation, let's say if somebody want to contribute to the documentation, so for documentation we had to like add to your GitHub wiki, like submit a pull request for your GitHub wiki, or do we have to like add in the sample project?
The samples project.
Okay.
Wiki
Okay.
is primarily for contributor guidelines, roadmap, contribution guidelines, and some high level documentation. Because
Okay.
what I feel is that in documentation, someone as developers would like to see the
Mhm.
actual code.
Okay.
I mean,
Base.
we are free to add more. I mean, if it's something like non-code, something which does not involve code, then feel free to add to wiki. But if it's something purely code specific, like you are adding some more scenarios for tables, then it should go to the samples project. If it's something like purely architectural,
Mm-hmm.
then we can go on to wiki. I mean, it
Okay,
actually
because
comes down to the question that is it more of code or is it more of text?
okay,
Hmm.
okay. Because see, the thing is that most of the time, what I have seen, like not every developer is comfortable to go into code and see how to use that component. So
Hmm.
even if you see the see the documentation of Blazorize,
Hmm.
it has, although it is a completely separate project. Blazorize documentation is completely separate project, or
Hmm.
Matt Blazor documentation is completely separate project, I guess. But Matt Blazor is kind of approach using that approach of hosting the sample code as sample. They haven't documented it like a document, text based document.
Hmm.
Whereas I like this the Blazorize approach, where they have a complete different site and explanation of how to use a component. Even though
Hmm.
like some of the component have missing methods, like they have, but they have listed it like the proper documentation, that okay, like for example in your library you have like forms and tables.
Hmm.
So like there should be one page where it says like, okay, what is a form, what all it does, what are the calling methods, how what all properties are available in the form, what all. I mean, like that's just my suggestion, that if
Hmm.
we maybe we can do it on wiki rather than do it on the larger scale, like creating a whole together separate workspace for that, or project for that. Maybe we
Hmm.
can do it, and you can do it on wiki, or we can do it on wiki, that
Hmm.
we can create that methods for that. Okay, these are the components and how to use that, because
Hmm.
not everybody is directly ready to jump in the code. Like that's my suggestion.
That's completely, I mean, what I also feel. I mean, like I said, if since that is mostly text, that would go into wiki.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So like how to use the things probably. Uh, okay, I do this. What do we call it? Let me put a this thing that, okay, I'll add this thing
Hmm.
in the documentation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to contribute to wiki, you can clone the wiki's repo. I mean, GitHub supports repositories. Uh,
Okay. So, and for wiki, like if we have to contribute to wiki, do we have like again, do we need any requirement on the local side? Because frankly speaking, I haven't used GitHub wiki ever earlier. So,
um, just a second, let me show you. So this is Blazor UI, the wiki. So it has only markdown files. So what
okay,
I do is I open it with code. Code already has a markdown preview.
okay,
So I type in here and it will show me the demo here.
okay,
So
okay,
whatever we start typing, we'll see the preview here as well.
okay,
It's only markdown file, so no external dependencies as such.
okay.
One thing that you'll notice is like things like this, so they don't come in preview. So
Mm.
the reason is this is actually GitHub specific markdown. So GitHub
Mm-hmm.
has made some their own changes to markdown, wherein
Mm-hmm.
some tags like square brackets with a space will actually show up as a checkbox here, an
Okay,
unchecked checkbox. And if you do across here, it will show up as a checked checkbox. So this is something GitHub specific markdown. Um, but for the whole wiki, except markdown, nothing else is present.
okay,
I
okay.
mean, GitHub
Yeah.
wiki
So,
created one GitHub debug.log, but I do not use it, so it's just there. Git ignore and just three markdown files.
okay,
Mm.
okay. Yeah, and what about this? Like you have this pages, and there is this thing. There is a structure also. Like you can say we can have home, contribution guidelines, roadmaps, and then there is one more page that is controls, and inside that controls we can have separate pages for that. So you can
Mhm.
add this thing from here from the GitHub, or we can do it on the offline. Sorry, I'm.
Yes, we can do a new page from here as well. Um, or we can I mean it comes down to personal preferences and how comfortable are you with markdown. So if you are not that much comfortable, you can just go on here, create a new page. You can just type in like you do something like, and you can have a preview, right?
I'm not talking about that thing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
basically talking about if you go on the back, go on wiki. I'm talking about this menu, this pages menu
Mm-hmm.
is coming here
Mm-hmm.
in some repositories. What I have seen that there is like there is an option that kind of tree is created. So, for
Okay,
example, like after
so that
inside.
actually follows the folder structure.
Oh, okay.
So the folder structure you see here will actually represent the structure here.
Okay,
And
got
hyphen,
it.
the name of the file will actually represent this with hyphen representing space. So contribution
Okay,
hyphen guidelines become contribution space guidelines.
okay, okay. 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 Ah, thanks. Thanks.
Mm.
I think, yeah. Okay. So Mladen is also here. I think we have completed this early. So Mladen, would you like to take on, start early, or do you need time for preparation? Then probably Abhishek will continue doing some live coding. Otherwise, we can start with Blazorized session.
No, I'm ready to start.
Okay.
If anything is,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, I'll
it's okay.
I'll
Okay.
stop sharing.
Okay. Thanks, Abhishek. Thanks a lot for this informative session, and thanks a lot for telling me about how to contribute to Wiki on GitHub. It was a new thing for me.